Who am I?
Are you kidding me?
I know. You know me, I like blue team,
Wow.
white team, Amogus. That's Shlomi right there.
There's no C, by the way.
Yeah, leave the pointer on the face.
Bro, that's such a good quality like slide deck and like screen. Look at that.
That's what I'm saying.
Wow.
So,
oh my god.
Before we start talking about zero trust, we need to know what a perimeter-based network is.
Oh, I thought that was FTL first.
Here we have Skeld. What a normal perimeter-based network would be is that you'd have your on physical location workplace, and all your nice stuff would be inside, all your trusted stuff, all your work stuff, servers, would be inside. There'd be a firewall cutting it off, and then a DMZ with like any outward public-facing applications would be like your web servers, anything that needs to be accessed publicly, that would be like in the DMZ, and then that's cut off from the internal stuff if you don't want people accessing publicly, obviously, like your databases or just Active Directory or stuff in general. Problem with this is that might have worked in the past, but now we have things such as cloud, remote users, data centers, so many different things, that like aren't physical, and so this physical network isn't actually going to be working anymore. Another problem with this is that once they get inside, they can laterally move however much they want. They can, everything inside is trusted. They're like, everything inside is good, everything out is bad. But once an attacker gets inside, which they're going to get inside, there's going to be a 0 day on their web app or something like that. Then it's free game to go wherever they want. And that's why, in the past, this isn't going to be working anymore. So what's zero trust?
John has a question.
Yes, John?
Can we go back a slide, please?
Yes.
What's going on with this FTL and? Is this FTL and?
Yeah.
Do you play FTL?
Yeah.
It's a good game.
Yeah.
I just wanted to check.
It's just that, yeah. So, what's zero trust? It's a way of approaching network security pretty much of implicitly assuming stuff is bad. So basically, you're assuming there's no security difference between intranet or internet, aka inside or outside. It's a combination of different techniques and technologies to pretty much make sure all traffic's encrypted, all traffic's authenticated, and that pretty much anything going on inside your network, is good traffic, and you kind of assume by default then that there's a breach so that there isn't much lateral movement. So what's it made of? A ton of different stuff, pretty much. Basically, it shouldn't be a DMZ or perimeter anymore, really, for security reasons. That's no longer needed. The idea is that everything's defaultly, implicitly bad, so that perimeter doesn't really matter because both inside and outside are bad. Some sort of identity provider to track your users, so like Active Directory or any other sign-on thing you do as a corporation. It's application user-centric. It's no longer like infra-centric or location-centric. You need like a policy evaluation service. So something that's like, okay, we want all our Windows systems to be patched to this policy. Like, they all need to have this enabled, this update, and everything. And so that if it doesn't have that, you can then deny it through that policy evaluation service, pretty much. And some sort of access proxy so that when they do try and connect to these services, and users actually want to act when your workers actually want to do stuff, that they go through this proxy that then allows or denies based on whatever context features they have. And then you also want some anomaly detection. If, for example, Jim logs on in electrical to the web server, then all of a sudden he's in navigation logging onto the database. He can't get there that fast. He must have vented. Or something else is going on. You want some anomaly detection to stop that access. There's also a combination of other techniques and technologies. Microsegmentation, aka segmenting your network so that things can't really talk to each other and attackers can't laterally move as easily. So a software parameter. So instead of a physical one or a network one, you instead have software that helps gateway the services out from attackers or outsiders in general. Or single packet authorization, which is this weird thing with like an addition where it's like, oh, let me authenticate first, then I can do everything. So access management, pretty important. So you want least privilege. Pretty much everything has access, only what needs access, which probably makes sense already. But that's what you want. You want nothing should access what it shouldn't be able to, pretty much. only the engineers need to access a repo. Only they should be able to access a repo. They only need read. They only need read. You don't give them write. Stuff like that. You know, centralized policy. So you don't want like a policy, 10, 20 different policies from all the different servers and campuses or whatever you have. You want one central policy, so it's easy to change, easy to manage. Pretty much, that's all you want in general. You want dynamic active decisions. So pretty much, you want the stuff to be like dynamically like assigned on the fly. So like, you don't want predetermined, I guess, acts. How do I word this? So I want dynamic access, which means you want it to be dynamically like decided when a user tries to access a resource, like at that moment. You don't want it like, oh, these guys can already access like guaranteed. You want it so that based on the context of like a certain access incident, like if someone tries to access like right now compared to last week, stuff's gonna change, and you want that to dynamically change, but whether they're access denied based on that. Maybe you want things like MFA. MFA is pretty good for keeping attackers out. Because, oh, they have your credits, but they don't have your phone. Pretty good. Single sign-on is also pretty useful. You don't want to have every single service need to go through this access check if they can just prove their identity and is authenticated once. It needs to be adaptive. Again, technology is always changing. It's always going to be evolving. This cloud evolved from perimeter to cloud. Lots of this is going to change. It needs to be able to change. Context is key. There's a lot of different what's, and that's pretty important. So whether you allow or deny someone to access it, you need to know, is the wrong group able to access the resource? Is the device healthy? Is there a 0-day just released on the device and it's not patched yet? Or does the device have known malware on it that you need to deny, obviously, because that's pretty bad? Is the device, a mobile device or desktop? Dave should access the repo on the desktop, but maybe he doesn't need to access that database on his mobile phone. What is being accessed, obviously, pretty important. Time of sign in. Is he signing in at midnight when he doesn't work? He already worked 12 hours earlier in the day. Probably shouldn't allow access then, Probably not Dave or something anomalous. What's the signing risk? What's the probability that it isn't Dave? Or the user risk? What's the probability that Dave's been compromised and there's like some malware on his box or someone malicious is trying to log in? They should be made in real time based on, the context of the situation. And certificates. They're great. So, device certificates. Pretty much, it's like a single flip of the bit in AD, but you want a device database so that pretty much you can know what devices you're managing and know what policies then you can set for those devices. And device certificate is a good way, to sort through that. Hey, this device knows it's a web server because it has this certificate proving it's a web server. And then you can use the context of, oh, it's a web server, and whether it can access the database or whether a user can log on to it, stuff like that. It can help keep track of device health, obviously. Oh, this device has this certificate, and it has, oh, it's a web server that is Jira, and Jira just released a vulnerability. Boom, then we know the device health was dropped, and we need to patch that before we can allow it access to our databases or stuff like that. And then you'll be able to be revoked. So like, oh, that Jira server did get popped. Or we need to just revoke its certificate so it can't access those databases anymore. Stuff like that. And obviously they need to be stored safely so they can't be stolen or copied. Just in general. So what are the benefits of zero trust? I mean, pretty much it allows conditional access to important resources. It's not like, oh, if you're inside our perimeter network, you're good to go. You actually need certain like security access control stuff to be actually access, important things. It restricts lateral movement, so when an attacker gets inside the network, they can't just jump around pretty easily. Pretty good. They allow users to work where and when they want. So because internet and intranet are pretty much the same, remote users don't really face that much difficulty anymore. They don't really need, in some examples, they don't even need a VPN anymore. They just from Google, the Encore example, which you'll see in a second, they made everything publicly available to their workers. Crazy. And by default, it assumes a breach. So it is much easier, takes a much better steps to stopping attackers. If it already assumes a breach, it's going to be much more strict, and it stops attackers kind of much more simply than before maybe without zero trust, you might wait until there's a breach to actually take steps. Yanko. This is a really good example. Probably credited a talk on it. Google's implementation of zero trust. The white paper, they pretty much took their network completely public, accessible through public DNS or public IPs. And what they did, pretty much crazy. And they had a ton of complex authentication requirements so that workers could access from anywhere, any network, anything. They had stuff like device health. Again, if the device is unhealthy, if there's known vulnerabilities or you think there's malware on it, they can't access it. They have certificates for each device that's stored in the database to help know which device is what. They have user and service DB, so user DB that just has a list of all the attributes of the user. Oh, they're a full-time engineer that has worked this long and works from this location. And so they can use that information and know, okay, can this person access this resource? If they're full-time, sure they can. Are they an engineer? Oh, they can't access this, but they can access this. They work from Colorado, for example. Dave from Colorado. He works from Colorado, but if he's connecting from Saudi Arabia, hey, probably should deny Dave from Saudi Arabia because that's not where he works. And they did a lot of different stuff like that to help, work with making everything public, which obviously as a worker, that's really, really nice to be able to just sit down in whatever cafe or network you want and just access your work stuff and it be secure as well, which is crazy. To wrap it up, zero trust is designed for the internet pretty much. It's implemented though on both intra and internet, obviously. Breach is assumed. It pretty much helps a business evolve, like everything. It's an entire landscape. Instead of being just focused on the physical aspect, works with the cloud, with remote users. Businesses are just expanding from just one physical location. And that's why zero trust is helping them that. And everything, everything's authenticated. And you can use this suspicion to vote the imposter out. Questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
I have an existing system where it's like perimeter based. How difficult do you think it would be to shift? Like, is that like a major factor in why people aren't implementing zero trust? Or
Well, to answer the first part of the question, zero trust is a big step to implement. It's a big change to the way you approach your network security, and it's not just like one tool you install. It's a whole infrastructure change that you would need to gradually implement to change. You can't, especially if you're like a small company, you can't be like Google, where you rip out everything and put it all in a new place publicly and all works fine. You actually have to do like incremental stuff. Companies though are implementing it. I think it was in one of the sources I researched, like 50% of stuff that companies they surveyed had already implemented it. So I mean, again, if you ever worked on co-op, whatever, you've probably seen like stuff like that where it's not, especially since like of COVID times where you're working remote, we're probably taking steps to implement stuff like that so that you can work remote. It doesn't really matter whether you're inside the network or not. So probably in those cases you might be using a VPN. Any other questions?
Sus.
yes,
Mommy is sus.
Mommy is pissed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. I won't heckle you too hard.
John kind of stuff.
Apparently, I heckled you too much in your dream or something.